Hey guys, Curse of the Polish Geek, and welcome to another movie review. More like a retro review, because to prepare for Wicked for Good, which only comes out tomorrow, I decided to do now a retro review of Return to Oz. I could have really done the retro review of 30s MGM classic, The Wizard of Oz, but ultimately I decided to give a review to its much lesser known, very underrated, unofficial sequel, and that might actually be my hottest take ever on this channel. Possibly even more hot take that Man's Chestnut Worlds that are much better from the Curse of the Black Pearl, but now it will probably be the hottest take in the history of this channel so far, because I actually think I prefer Return to Oz more than I prefer the MGM classic. And now, you all probably wanna shoot me now, but you gotta be honest when you review a movie, right? And yes, I just feel Return to Oz, for me at least, it's just a better movie. And why do I prefer Return to Oz? Well, the first thing, let's just get one thing out of the way about the 30s classic. And I think that the reason this movie is so beloved might largely be due to nostalgia. It certainly was, I guess it was good for what it was back when it came out and what it did for the cinema and all that. I very much respect the movie, but this is not the movie that just speaks to me personally. For me, the movie is one of those like basically like meh. Like again, I very much highly respect the movie and what it did for the history of cinema, and if you're a fan of this movie, then I totally respect you and totally understand why you love the movie so much. Again, I respect that. I'm just explaining why it doesn't really speak to me personally and why I prefer Return to Oz. Although the other credit I will give to the classic is that the songs admittedly are really great, especially the classic "We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz." Dun, 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 dun. But other than completely not having any songs, again, I just think that Return to Oz is simply a much better movie. And an interesting detail that I will have to share about it is that not many people know, like almost nobody knows, is that it's actually much more faithful to the Oz books, actually. It's much more authentic and faithful to the Oz books, because the classic movie, completely overtaken L. Frank Baum's books, and that's really became most well known as the definite take on the Wizard of Oz, even though the actual world building and the characters and all that, it's actually much more authentic in Return to Oz. And yes, this is very much partially the reason why I prefer Return to Oz. It's not the only one, but that's the first start, because an interesting detail you're about to learn about me, I actually did read several Oz books as a little kid, actually. I mean, first two, and maybe, first three, actually, I read the first three Oz books as a little kid. That was actually my introduction to the world of the Wizard of Oz. I can't call myself really a fan. It's like, I enjoyed the books as a little kid, and again, the MGM classic movie is a movie they highly respect, but it's not really for me, and I did like part 1 of Wicked, and I am very much looking forward to seeing part 2 tomorrow, especially that pretty recently I also seen the play, which I very much loved, so, and who knows, if it lives up to expectation, I might take over Return to Oz as my favorite Oz movie, but so far, actually, very much my favorite Oz movie is, yes, you guessed it, the one we are reviewing, Return to Oz, because, as I said, I read the books in my childhood. I can also tell you that the first thing that I think this movie is doing much better than the classic one, and also much more faithful to the books, is that I think just Firuza Balk is just a much better Dorothy Gale. And this is the true Dorothy Gale from the books, because Judy Garland, the problem with Judy Garland is that she works very well as the character, as the character in the MGM movie classic. I mean, she works very well as this new original character, but she certainly doesn't feel as a 8-year-old, 9-year-old girl that Dorothy Gale is supposed to be, in contrast to Firuza Balk, who very much is, on the other hand, as a little kid. Because that's the thing, Dorothy Gale is supposed to be a little kid, and she was played by a grown woman in the classic movie, but Return to Oz chose instead to cast a little girl in her role, and I think that not only that's much better, but also, as I said, Farrisa Bulk very much gives an amazing performance as Dorothy Gale. She has just sweet charm to her, and in general, she makes Dorothy Gale such a likable character. And again, this she much more feels like an authentic Dorothy Gale that from the books, instead of like, because again, not saying necessarily that Judy Garland did a bad performance. Objectively, her performance was great, but at the same time, forget that this was technically supposed to be a little girl. So this is the first way in which I think Return to Oz is a much better movie. But also, another thing I love, and that one is admittedly more divisive, but I love how it's much darker also than the classic movie. Like, it's one of those scary movies that even though it's technically a kid's movie, but actually in some ways it's scarier than a lot of horror movies, especially all the modern horror movies. Like, it's like one of those kids movies that in some ways it's kind of scarier and more disturbing than a lot of adult horror movies for some reason. Like, especially the scene with like Princess Mombi, who we'll get to soon actually, about her like swapping heads, and then the scene where Dorothy Gale steals the magic powder, actually, I mean the powder of life, to bring Gump to life actually, and then Mombi wakes up without like completely headless, and then chases after Dorothy. Like, yeah, this is some like really creepy and disturbing stuff, but that's actually why I think this movie works so well for me actually. And I also think the supporting characters here are really good and really likable. Like, I really like TikTok, and I also really like Jack Pumpkinhead, and I love kind of his like the kind of how he develops basically this mother-son relationship with Dorothy Gale, even though Dorothy Gale is very much a little girl, but she's so much more mature than him, and then he kind of comes to see her as his mother initially, and yep, I really love that. And Gump is also really good. Yep, really like the supporting characters, and I think that Dorothy's friendship with them and chemistry is really well done. I also really love the world building here, and I love how authentically otherworldly the Land of Oz feels here, because yes, I'm not gonna be arguing that the set designs of the 30s MGM Classic, they are certainly pretty beautiful and colorful, and from an objective standpoint I say they haven't aged badly at all. They actually have aged quite well, but at the same time, I just love how authentic and otherworldly the Land of Oz feels here, and it truly feels so real actually, yep. And another thing I want to talk about is also the two new villains, the Gnome King and Princess Mombi, who truly feel like a dangerous threat that they are, because like the Wicked Witch of the West, like, let's face it, she kind of comes across as a basically a cliche wicked witch actually, and how even with the Wicked play and the adaptations of that, she feels even less threatening. But Princess Mombi and the Gnome King actually, they genuinely feel like really threatening evil villains that they very much are, and they are some of those villains that you very much root for to be just defeated basically, because they are so evil and disturbing. And I also really love the design of the Gnome King. I think it's really well done and much better than any modern CGI. But now that we are on the subject of the Gnome King, I'll also have to mention that detail actually, that he has the ruby slippers, and that's the one detail that they basically borrowed from the MGM Classic, because the original shoes in the books were actually not the ruby slippers, they were like the silver shoes, but this is chose to clearly take from the MGM Classic, likely because it's an unofficial sequel, even if characters do kind of feel very different actually, but because it's technically an unofficial sequel, they decided to borrow the ruby slippers, which is fine. This is like not the detail I care about either way, like they could go with the silver shoes or with the ruby slippers. Honestly, I don't care one way or the other, just had to mention it. But overall, Return to Oz is very underrated. And again, that's likely possibly my hottest take on this channel so far, but you gotta be honest with your opinions, don't you? So yes, I personally prefer Return to Oz. Like, it's darker and also it's more faithful to the books. And I think Fairuza Balk is just such a much better Dorothy Gale, and I love how actually they chose to make her a little girl like she's supposed to be in the books. And in general, in my opinion, it's just a better movie. Like, the one thing that I did miss some of the cool songs from the original classic, but that's pretty much it. Other than that, again, I just prefer Return to Oz. That's just my opinion. So, thank you folks for checking out this retro review. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel, and see you soon in the review of Wicked for Good when I see it. Talk to you then.